Hello. I haven't made new videos as quickly as I would have liked to. I have one on the topic of overpopulation coming up, and it's taken a while because I've gone through about 5 scripts, which I've revised because of research reasons, but also because I felt like they weren't organised right. I could have made other videos in the downtime between each try, but I have a problem where I approach things in related areas very sequentially. Nonetheless, I'm right at the end of a version of the script I like and figuring out the finishing touches. Doing the video is the easy part because it's not like I've ever focused on creating fancy graphics or anything. So that should be up relatively soon, and I should get on with other videos more or less as previously detailed. I also have a new microphone which I'm using now. I'm not here though just to give an update. It's the final day of the UK general election. Polling stations opened at 7 AM and they'll stay up until 10 PM. And although you can probably guess my opinions, and it's too late to really change anyone's mind, I felt like saying my piece anyway. I really wish we could move past Brexit, but I voted to leave, and with how we've been fucked about, I'm ready to accept a deal like what Boris has drawn up. Even if a deal ties the UK into certain obligations with the EU, that's better than nothing at this point. Some would say that it's all the downsides of obeying EU rules without the democracy. Firstly, as if being in the EU Parliament has ever really helped us, and secondly, a withdrawal date has expiry terms for all of those things. I would have ultimately preferred the so-called no-deal option, but I don't think that's going to happen. If you want Brexit now, you have to vote for the Tories, otherwise you're throwing your vote away. After years of austerity, I can see why that's a bitter pill for people who both supported Brexit and at the same time don't like fiscal conservatism. However, if that's a problem for you, then use what time is left in this day before you vote to read the Conservative Manifesto. They are effectively ending any kind of cuts with this manifesto, which I suppose on the flip side will dismay you if you are a fiscal conservative. The Tories are promising quite moderate spending increases in the NHS and infrastructure. They even seem to be addressing areas like the disastrous ATOS assessments for disabled people, with a section that declares that people with long-term conditions shouldn't have to prove the same thing over and over again. The Conservatives under Boris are going for a different approach than Cameron and Theresa May did, repudiating quite a few previous policies. On immigration, the Tories want to institute the Australian-style points system that previously was a UKIP policy. Personally, I would prefer net zero immigration. That's net zero, not zero, so emigration matching immigration as a target. But that's not going to happen. You can consider the policy they're adopting to be a small step in the right direction. Is Boris a crook and a liar? Will he keep his promises? I think you can apply that to any of the party leaders today, so it's a dead heat as far as I'm concerned. The infamous Boris bust that said 350 million went to the EU simply omitted the tax rebate we get back, and so it would actually be 250 million. Was that an error or a lie? I don't know, but don't act as if that's the main reason people voted Brexit to begin with, or as if that would have changed the tide this whole time. Labour are convinced that Boris will sell the NHS to Donald Trump, even though what the NHS being on the table actually means is that the NHS will have to negotiate for drug prices with US pharmaceutical companies. Boris claims that he would keep the prices as they are. Maybe he's lying, maybe he isn't. You can only go on what policies they put in their manifesto and the things they actually claim. Certainly Labour is telling porkies if they want to pretend the problems in the NHS are due to privatisation. Contractors are used for things like blood plasma supply, but the NHS is still the NHS, and it's not like the blood plasma supply has shrank. The issue is actually with demand. You see, the NHS itself was ring-fenced from the David Cameron austerity programme. Funding was still increased every year. Certain side services to the NHS, such as mental health programmes, did see cuts, and some have argued that this led to further strain on the mainline NHS. But with the scale of the problem, I don't think that's it. That we have an ageing population is some of the problem, but this is only a portion again. The issue Labour wants to ignore here is the effect of immigration, the sheer scale of it. Foreign doctors are supposed to bail the NHS out, but naturalised foreigners are also making up a lot more of the patients, so it's like trying to remove water that's got into a boat by poking more holes into it. It gets worse when people who aren't even going to become citizens come from abroad to use the services. The problem with the NHS is a demand problem. Every year the NHS gets more funding, and perhaps it hasn't been enough, but it's going to have to be a lot more because of this factor that Labour wants to brush under the rug. In their manifesto, Labour are very light on immigration, as you might expect. They also have their little side manifesto, the Race and Faith Manifesto, which I would also consider giving a read. It's the typical white privilege bullshit you'd expect, and they want to teach it in schools. They want their diversity quotas on corporate boards too. They want to spend colossal amounts, which they claim is fully costed, and which I doubt. Anyone in the top 5% is getting a big tax hike, but I wonder how they plan to pay for all their nationalisations and new programmes without raising taxes on lower brackets. Finally, on Brexit, they are promising to create a Labour version of a Brexit deal, and then run a second referendum to see if we want it. And then they will implement what we decide. Where have I heard that before? No, I bit the bullet and gave the Conservatives my vote. I would say it's the best of two bad options, but it's more like a mediocre option and an insane option. Oh, and the Lib Dems exist. They're a party, apparently.